Let's go! We are back with another episode and with an amazing author. Stephanie Ross is in the house today, folks. We're going to be digging into her new book, Seasons of a Soulpreneur. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jake. I'm super excited to be here and to chat with you today.
Oh yeah, fire me up on all topics, okay? I love talking about the seasons of an entrepreneur. We're going to dig into that. But I want to start here. Can you talk about your background and what kind of led you to wanting to write a book? Because from all the research that I've done and from getting to know you, you've had quite the entrepreneurial journey starting at a pretty young age. So, can you give everybody a little bit of the background and then what ultimately led you to wanting to create this book?
Yes, was a little girl that loved reading and writing. My mom said that I was reading before most kids even pick up a book and always had my nose in one. I loved writing. I always said I would write a book someday. I honestly didn't think it would be this soon, but because of my entrepreneurial journey that I experienced in the last decade, I just continued to find this push and follow that nudge to get it down on paper without any real hard deadline and just kept writing and writing and writing and then decided it was time to hit publish.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. And for everyone that's listening, can you share some of the different entrepreneurial journeys and entrepreneurial things that you've been involved in? Because you're not someone who's just done one thing forever. You've been an entrepreneur for a long time and you've gotten a lot of experience, but you've also had your feet in a bunch of different things. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you've tried a lot of different things in your pursuit of being a great entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been multi-passionate, and I think most creative entrepreneurs are. My first business I started when I was in college at the age of 20. It was a fitness and yoga studio that started inside of an MMA gym, and it was just small, and I grew it and scaled it for a full decade. I had three different expansions. I had a full team, and COVID was a big turning point that led me to other things. But as I talk about in the book, we have these incredible turning point moments that really force us to pause and step back and say, is this what I really want? So I felt the call at that same time to build a community for female small business owners called Sister Circle. That is one of my main businesses now, and also stepped into real estate to try something totally new and outside of my comfort zone. And then eventually, after running three businesses for a year, I decided that was too much and needed to put my energy and efforts into real estate and Sister Circle. So I actually closed my first business after 10 years, pursued it from age 20 to 30, and now obviously stepping into this role as an author. And just recently had a baby within the last 7 months. So I'm a new mom. And I think just taking on new challenges and learning new things and new businesses allows me that kind of freedom and creativity that I really desire.
Yeah, I love this. We're gonna be able to dig into this a lot more today, which I'm really excited about. You mentioned earlier you wanted to write a book since you were a kid, but you didn't think it'd be this soon. So what was kind of the inspiration to being like, you know what? I can do it now. Why am I gonna wait? And you did this while being pregnant, right? So and having a newborn. So talk to me about like what was going through your head there that made you decide that this was the right time, even though you're getting ready to have a kid.
Yeah, it honestly felt like a crazy goal to set. But when I started writing, it was actually right after I scaled back my first business. And when I did that, I felt like I was a failure. I felt like I was going through my rock bottom. And I actually picked up a workbook that talked about writing as like a way of working through entrepreneurial trauma, not entrepreneurial specifically, but just trauma in general. So that's actually what called me to start writing my stories. And I just kept writing. So I wrote for like 2 years off and on whenever I felt inspired, whatever came to me. And then it wasn't until last year when I was 7 or 8 months pregnant that I started feeling this gut intuition that I need to publish this book soon, like as soon as possible. When
Mm,
this baby is born, this book is going to be born. And it felt really insane because, yes, the timing did not feel right stepping into this role of motherhood. But I've always followed my gut and my intuition. And the reason why I felt so called to finish the book and publish it was when I was writing it, I wanted it to feel real and raw and authentic. And I wanted to pull those emotions into the book so the reader could
Mm,
feel them. And I knew becoming a mom would just completely rock my world and change my perception to the point where I wasn't going to be able to write from that real, raw, authentic place. So I
mm,
didn't want to be so far removed from the chapters and the stories I was writing about that I couldn't go back to those feelings.
yeah.
So that is a huge reason why I felt the need to finish it. And my son was actually 2 weeks overdue. So when I was up at 2 a.m. with, insomnia for the last few months, all I did was just write and write and write. And then when he was born, I really only had one last chapter to write, and that's the last chapter of the book. And it's a big surprise because I was told I was having a girl and I ended up with a boy. And so that's the whole like surrender to be surprised. But that was really why the timing it felt wrong, but I knew it was right.
Wow. Okay, I gotta ask a question. You thought you were having a girl and then you ended up having a boy. So did the doctors tell you, oh, you're gonna have a girl? Did you have like a gender? Were you planning on like girl name, girl clothes, everything? And then all of a sudden the baby pops out and it's surprise.
So initially, and this is so funny because again, it goes back to gut intuition. Initially, I thought I was having a boy. I only had one ultrasound at 20 weeks. We did a whole gender reveal, and supposedly it was a girl that we found out from the gender reveal. So I went through the second half of pregnancy, changing my mind again. Okay, it's not a boy, it's a girl. Picked the name Valerie Rose, which then once he was born, I was so dead set on this name. So his name is Valory, Valory. We call him Val, but it stands for, strength and health and vitality and courage. And so, yeah, it's just a really crazy story, which I was like, this is all divinely meant to be
Wow.
because that is the last chapter of the book.
Wow, wow, wow. Okay, this is great. So, okay, let's talk about the process a little bit, right? Because, you know, going through this during the time that you did it, there's a lot of things that's happening for you, right? A lot of different things, a lot of first time experiences, a lot of newness. And then
Mhm.
there's also getting an entire book done. So, what was the process like for you, and how maybe was it different than your initial expectations after having a lifelong dream of doing this?
I realized I love writing. I didn't realize I would love writing that much. So I'm like, I can totally see myself doing another book at
Yeah,
some point. So I really enjoyed that process. I loved working with my writing coach who helped me come up with the metaphor for the book, which is the gardening, the seasons. So that was really fun to have a writing coach. I think I'd never had that before,
yeah,
obviously. So that was really fun. The parts that I found stressful were just the things outside of my control. The deadlines, the timelines for the stuff that I wasn't doing. But I think this book was such a reminder of the theme of surrender. I felt like birthing this book was so much like birthing my baby because I thought there was a due date and I thought it was a girl and just all of these things that we never really know like when it's going to happen or how it's going to happen and all of those things. So it really tested me in that like way of like,
yeah,
okay, surrender. This is supposed to be fun. That's why I'm doing it. So just like continuing to enjoy the process, even
yeah,
when certain pieces of it are not in your control.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's great. So you have your baby as you're going through this process, right? And then it gets time to birth the book shortly after, right?
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you which one is more exciting, okay? But I am curious about, people always make this analogy. Now, as a man, I'm never going to have a baby come out of me, right? But
Yes.
I would be I have to ask this question because so many people often equate having birthing a book, right? It's a phrase we hear all the time. And obviously birthing a book is different than birthing a baby, right? We're aware of this. But in terms for you, in terms of some of the mindset stuff, as someone who went through these things months apart, what was it like for you in terms of releasing the book and really birthing it to the world? How did that feel? Did it feel like you were birthing something new? Did it feel lighter, heavier than you expected? What was that like for you as you went through this experience of making that dream of yours a reality?
Yeah, there's so many emotions. It's high and it's low, and that's exactly, even just becoming a mom, like there are so many emotions. I think enjoying the highs, like savoring those moments, it's like book launch day. I drove around and hand delivered books to the people that either wrote book praise or wrote a story for the book and took pictures and documented it. It was so fun. And then it's like the next day you're like, okay, now what do I do? And I think it's the same thing. Like you had this beautiful newborn baby and you're so happy. And then the next day you're like, oh my gosh, this is my life now. How do I navigate this like new season of stepping into a new role and identity? Like I said, now being an author, what does that mean? What do I want to do with this? How do I want to show up differently? And motherhood is so much of the same thing because, yeah, you're like stepping into a new chapter and a new role, really.
Yeah, and a new season of life, right?
Mhm.
And your book, Seasons of a Soulpreneur, is really all about these different seasons, right? You talked about creating the metaphor of the garden, right? So walk us through the book a little bit. Like, what are the breakdowns? How do you define season? What does it look like as an entrepreneur? And what might we learn in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wrote it around the metaphor of gardening because that was something I actually took up as a hobby, an outlet away from my business to like focus on something else when things were not
Yeah.
working a few years ago when I made my big pivot. So it became really obvious to me that there are four seasons. The first is planting. You have your idea, you have your little dream, your little seed that you're putting into the soil. And that's so exciting. And you have all these like hopes and dreams of what it will be, and you have this vision. And a big theme in the book, too, is starting small, but still dreaming big. You don't have to
Yeah.
shrink your dreams, but you have to start somewhere. So that's the planting phase. And then we all hit the growing phase, right? Where we're
Yep.
like, okay, now we've birthed this business. And which direction are we going to go? How are we going to grow? And a lot of the growing phase is just testing, trial and error, beta testing, trying something, figuring out what you like, what you don't like,
Yep.
what audience you're attracting, and then growth. And sometimes growth is at a cost. So sometimes that can lead to then the next season, which is weathering the storms. And sometimes the storms come from that growth phase, and sometimes they're just completely outside of your control. So a lot of my storms were really like the pandemic, for example. Could not control it, but what are you going to do to weather it, whether
Yep.
you stay in your business or you pivot or you evolve? And then if you keep going and you weather those storms, because we're all going to have our own version of that. And if you don't quit, then eventually you're going to hit that harvest season. And I talk about how much sweeter the harvest is when you've gone through the storms.
Mm.
And I love that, you can even see this watching your garden, seeing a rainstorm, right? When the clouds clear up and the sun and the rainbows come out,
Yep.
the plants have grown. And so it really is about embracing all of those seasons because we're all going to go through them at some point or another. And the book is meant to be that guide that you continuously come back to resonate no matter what season you're in.
When someone's reading your book, kind of going off that point, could they, if they're in a season where they know they're weathering the storm, would you suggest they read it start to finish, or should they hop in at the weathering the storm, feel relatable, and then continue on? Like, how would you break it down? Because it is a cycle, right? And
Mhm.
you could be at any different point. So, how did you envision the reader reading it?
I think you could jump in at any point, but the way that it's written, even if you're not in, let's say, the planting season, you're in the weathering season, you're
Yep.
still going to get a lot out of reading it in order, not only because the stories I share are chronological, but after every chapter, there's reflection questions and there's
Awesome.
a bit for the new business owner and the seasoned business owner. So even
Mm,
if you're seasoned, here's what you get out of chapter one. Here's what you get out of chapter two. And it's honestly those continual reminders to go back to your why. Like
yeah.
when you have a bad day, you're in a tough season, why are you doing this? That's what the first part of planting will bring you back to. And then going back to growing, like, look at how much you've overcome. You can do this. So I think reading it in order, you're still going to get so much out of it no matter what season you're in.
Yeah. Now, one thing I noticed when I was looking at your book and when I chat with you and I see some of your branding is it's very colorful, very fun, very vibrant, very joyful. And I believe this is a big theme for you. So, how do you, no matter which season you're in, how do you always live life in that state of mind? Because that is something that doesn't necessarily have to change just because you're in a different season of your business.
Absolutely. Yeah, there were so many hard times when I just had to keep going. And I think I was fortunate. The business I was in, teaching fitness and yoga classes, I couldn't show up as, someone going through it, being super sad or in a state like I had to show up with a smile on my face, lots of energy, whether it was 5 a.m. or 7 p.m. So like that kind of served me. I didn't really feel like I had a choice to just continue to show up. So, but I do think it goes back to your people, the people you're serving. They will always remind you why you're there and what you're doing. Continuing to have those ways to remind yourself. I have notes on my board. If I'm having a bad day, I turn and look at that. I have my why written next to me that I can come back to. I continuously go back to these hard things I've overcome and remind myself of them. And also just like moving your body. I firmly believe that when you take care of yourself,
Mhm.
that's how you get through hard seasons. I write a lot about working out actually. Not only did I own a gym, but I fought MMA. So there's a whole chapter on that and how I used that season of MMA and overcoming and my comeback to remind myself to keep going in business.
Mm.
And now that I've had a baby, I tell myself all the time, I birthed a baby. I had 48 hours of, unmedicated labor. Like I can do anything, right? So it's continuing to find the stories in your own life that inspire you, that remind you of who you are and everything you've overcome. That is what can really push you through those hard seasons.
Mm. You mentioned your why a few times. What's your why as of today?
Positive impact, being a light in the world, whether that's for business owners, someone to just show up in their life as their best self. Like I think a lot of that goes back to health and wellness and spirituality and following your purpose, whatever that is. And that's a big reason why I wrote the book is I just felt like I could make a larger impact by getting this book in as many people's hands as possible to
Yeah.
inspire them to go chase your dreams. Like life is too short. We don't know how much time we have. That's my why is how can I inspire you to go do the thing that you say you want to do?
Yeah. Well, in the last year alone, you've birthed the baby, you've birthed the book, and now you probably find yourself having a little bit of extra time. Well, you're still dealing with a young baby, but my question to you is this. Now that you've kind of accomplished some amazing life achievements, where do you want to go from here?
That is a great question. And I find myself asking myself that now. And yeah, I don't feel like I necessarily have extra time because I think, time is something we're going to constantly fill. But I do think it's okay, what is the next level impact? How is it getting the book into people's hands? Is it speaking on stages? Is it getting on podcasts? Is it traveling places? I think a lot of it is just getting outside of my norm, making new connections, having new experiences, and making that a priority. Because I think it is really a lot harder in this season to be okay, like leaving my family for a few days or, going away. And so, really, just finding that balance of still pursuing the things that I want, but also really carving out that intentional time for my family. Because, like, that is why I own a business. That is why I pivoted my businesses to have a family and actually have time with
Yeah,
them because I've noticed that time goes even faster when you have children. So,
sure, sure.
just finding that balance of like chasing my dreams and also slowing down, soaking in the moment, being present as a mom, as a wife, all of those things.
Yeah, I love that response. And I think it's interesting when you one of the coolest things you can do when you have a book, as you can choose your own adventure when it comes to the monetization and growth strategy behind it. You've done the hardest part.
Yeah.
You have the book. Now you can focus on trying to generate more sales and reviews. You can focus on turning that into your keynote, your workshop. You can be local or international. You get to choose how you want to do this. Do you want to be really known in your local community? You have a community, right? Do you go for more of that approach, or do you want to go for the more mass appeal approach and start wider? The coolest thing about it though is you can choose any which direction you want because you already did the hardest thing, which is get the book done and get the book done well. And you did a great job of that. So if anyone were to ever ask you and they were thinking about writing a book and they were like, oh, I don't know if I have the time or I don't know what to write about, like what would be your number one piece of advice for someone who's considering writing a book?
I mean, the easiest thing is just start. Just start and do it without a deadline. Do it without, needing it for XYZ. I think that's why I started was I just didn't put a bunch of parameters around it. I was doing it for fun and honestly to heal. Like this book healed me
Mm,
in so many ways when I wrote it. Like I told my mentor that I'm like, this book healed me. Like I was in the thick of it. I was really down on myself. I was at my rock bottom when I started writing it. And writing through these chapters, and hopefully the reader feels that, like the raw emotion that I would cry when I was writing these chapters because I was going back to those moments in time. So whether you're writing a book for that or not, but if you have a story to share, I guarantee writing it down is going to
yeah.
feel like therapeutic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I got my copy, Seasons of a Soulpreneur.
Yay.
How can everybody here connect with you, learn more about you, and get the book?
Yeah, I am pretty active on social media, mostly Instagram. Stephanie Lee Ross is my account, or Soul Driven with Steph is like the book and podcast page. So I have a podcast. I'm doing chapter reads on the podcast. So you can even go listen to it like an
Awesome.
Audible for free. And then to find me and connect with me, my website is stephanieleeross.com.
Awesome. And we'll get all that linked up down below. So super easy for everybody. And here's what I want to say. I want to just say thank you for coming on the show today. This has been great, but also for trusting us to help you get this book out there. When we first met and we were talking about this and it was like, oh my gosh, you're going through pregnancy, you're about to have a newborn. Like, should you do this? Should you not do this? And you did it. And not only did you do it, but you did it exceptionally well. And so kudos to you for being able to prioritize what matters to you, take care of the things that are most important to you, and also have your dreams come true and not wait for forever. And that leads me to the challenge I want to give to everybody here today is you had a dream that you've known you wanted to write a book for a really long time. And one of your pieces of advice that you just said is you just got to start small. Dream big, but start small. And you talk about that in the book. And so here's my challenge for everyone today is what's that big dream of yours? I want you to write it down. And as soon as you've written it down, I want you to ask yourself, what's the first thing I could do to make that dream just a little bit closer? What's that first step that I can take? And that's the challenge I have for everybody today because Stephanie Ross just delivered here. She delivered in her book, Seasons of a Soulpreneur. Make sure to go check it out. Make sure to grab a copy of her book. Stephanie, thank you for being on the show. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right, you guys know what to do. Grab a copy of Stephanie's book, Seasons of a Soulpreneur. Make sure to tag her when you get a copy of the book and enjoy the heck out of it. No matter what season you're in, it's going to be a great read. All right, we'll talk to you all later.